So this is 0226 GMT on Saturday, the 25th of July 2020. This is an unscheduled edition of the test broadcast from the KhoodeelaarTV campaign, but this is actually to catch up and update and introduce some additional legal disclaimer. Anyone who posts any comment to this or similar programs on Facebook or other social media so-called is liable to legal action. And I simply refer to the case where a successful defamation action was brought against the wife of the then Speaker of the House of Commons, Sally Barkow. And this disclaimer, additional disclaimer, is being added here to notify everyone who made an intentionally defamatory, offensive comment to the program broadcast from Straight Dialogue slot, hosted by Shoaib Chaudhary in the evening of Friday, the 24th of July 2020. So the details of any notice against any of the defamers will be published in due course. Suffice to say that we know the limits of these defamers. They will be running for cover even before they get the proper notice served on them. One of them has been parading as a barrister, and we know this crook, and he will be running once he receives the notice. Now back to the issues of the hour, which is the list includes Robert Jenrick. He is persisting, isn't he, Jenrick? And also John Biggs. Biggs is actually compromised in many ways, more ways than Biggs realizes. And the elected councillors and the assorted other wrongdoers and members of the cabal of Jeremy Corbyn. We have unfollowed Jeremy Corbyn's Facebook account on Friday after noticing that Corbyn actually is being surrounded by bots or bots-like morons who mistook most rational arguments exposing Corbyn's unfitness as being antagonistic to Corbyn. No way. We pointed out that Corbyn lacks the intellectual faculties. That is the point. It is not a faction or fiction or a factional attempt to discredit or denounce or demonize. We identified the demonization of Corbyn as a person, so we oppose that demonization. So for these morons or these bots to confuse us with the demonizers shows that they are beneath the lowest level of contempt. And we have to deal with this because Corbyn is now parading himself as the leader, the radical leader, the revolutionary in exile after being ousted or replaced by Keir Starmer. And we talk about all of these in the fuller editions during the day on Saturday. But this broadcast is an introduction, and we shall be doing just the introduction. And one of the things that we needed to do in the program that was scheduled on Straight Dialogue for Saturday, which is later today, but was brought forward for some reason by the presenter Shoaib Chaudhry. One of the things we wanted to do is to discuss this. This is the kind of symptom of the disease that actually is persisting in the British body politic. This actually says that cross-party committee details government's abysmal handling of the economy, education, PPP in a catalogue of failure. Now that is dated, the Morning Star is dated the 24th of July 2020. It's Friday, 24th of July 2020. And this is something that cannot be treated reasonably, fairly, and intelligently in a slot that is branded, labeled talk show. That is not something that can do justice to the actual seriousness of the matter. So the communists slam shameful Starmer, which is the Communist Party of Britain, statement says that Britain's communists have attacked Sir Keir Starmer's shameful surrender to the anti-socialist, anti-Corbyn storyline on Labour's handling of anti-Semitism allegations. So that's on page 4 of the Morning Star on Friday, the 24th of July, 2020. That will remain there as one of the items that we shall be discussing in detail, examining in detail in due course in a fuller edition. And there is this racist immigration control, harassment and violation of the migrants in a place called Morton Hall, which is damaging lives. It's a detention center for so-called illegal migrants. Morton Hall is situated in Swinderby, Lincolnshire, and it is the place where the untold suffering is being caused to immigration removal targets and victims. And this is a report by the Morning Star's Bethany Riley. It's a new byline, comparatively new byline. So what we have to do in the Khoodeelaar campaign is to look at the details of the behavior of the councillors and Towers Council about housing, about the collapse of the crane on the 8th of July in Wattsgrove, and the behavior of Swan Housing Association, the degenerators, with whom the Towers Council remains in illicit collusion. And we have absolutely no reason to believe that any of the councillors is even aware of the magnitude of the problem being caused by the fact that the council is not delivering due diligence in terms of building security, in terms of making conditions, rigorous conditions on builders, so that they don't endanger the lives of local people or residents or tenants or occupants, which is what happened in Wattsgrove when 85-year-old June Harvey was killed by the crane that collapsed, a 10-year-old crane that collapsed that was actually hired by and installed by Swan Housing. And we have to ask the question, when John McDonnell endorsed Afsana Begum as representing the grassroots in the community in Tower Hamlets, what evidence did he base that on? Because if she had any connection with the grassroots, Afsana Begum would be up and down and talking loudly, noisily about the lack of security that is killing people. So she hasn't done that. And that is proof positive of the fact that John MacDonald was, if not a garden gnome in the variety of Jeremy Corbyn, he was a complete stranger to the reality of life in the community in Tower Hamlets in the east end of London and the reality of the betrayal of the community's expectations and the legal duties by the Tower Hamlets Council. And on to West Ferry Printworks, where Robert Jenrick has been embroiled in the controversy, rightly based on the fact that he received, on behalf of the Conservative Party or on behalf of himself, de facto, a bribe of 11 to 12,000 pounds from the porn billionaire Dirty Richard Desmond. And as a bribe, he received that bribe from the porn billionaire, and as a result of that exchange or transaction, he expedited the granting of the planning permission for the West Ferry Printworks degeneration project, ignoring, overlooking the local planning authority, which is the London Borough of Tower Hamlets Council. Politically, the Tower Hamlets Council is absolutely unfit, and in terms of functions, it is unfit. And as we have been saying about the bow crane collapse, it is unfit and it's negligent. But in terms of constitutional due process, Robert Jenrick was absolutely out of order and wrong to ignore the local authority. And that is where Jenrick's political grave actually is being done, because he is not only is he not apologizing for already admitted dishonesty and bias, he is now staging an attempted rebuttal of the Tower Hamlets Council as a planning authority. And he is widening the scope of abuse of constitutional obligation that local people are owed by the state about regulation of building constructions and so forth. So Jenrick is making things worse for himself by bringing in a whole range of deregulation measures which will remove all pretense of regulation and planning control over buildings, and local communities would suffer even more than what they have been suffering now, as exemplified or as evident in the last 5 years of behavior in Tower Hamlets, witnessed by Tower Hamlets Council's victims, suffered by Tower Hamlets Council's victims, and endured by Tower Hamlets Council's electors who have been let down, because not only is there an anti-democratic post-holder executive decision making mayor in post, but the councillors who are elected are also bribed into silence, bribed by various ways into silence. And so we have got a vacuum which exists and persists in Tower Hamlets. And as long as the vacuum persists, we shall be continuing to do our duty to fill the vacuum and to speak up for the community and ensure that there is a conducive atmosphere raised in the community in Tower Hamlets, so that the post of mayor is actually seen for what it is. It's a violation of everyone in the community, and it should go. We should scrap the mayor post. We should scrap the post that corrupts and is corrupting and is corruptible. And we have a post holder, an incumbent in that corrupt post, John Biggs, who is unfit for democracy. And we need to democratize the Tower Hamlets Council. Despite the fact that there are elected councillors, we don't see any evidence of the councillors delivering democracy. So we have to find a way of scrapping the elected mayor post and replacing it with a democratic structure of the council. And while we look for that, we have to find suitable people to become councillors. We have to get rid of most of the councillors who are doing no democratic service whatsoever. And they are, as I have said, in place because of default, by default. And we need to look at the demographic constitution, composition of the community, and make sure that the demography is sustainable and is sustained in a way that is conducive to democracy, that is consistent with democracy, that people are not scattered, degenerated, disenfranchised in a way that makes it impossible to have a substantial diversity presence on the council. And by diversity, I mean people like the Bangladeshis, people like the other communities that are not so called indigenous, but actually are members of the population in a significant numbers, and their rights and their needs and their voices are not being heard, they are not being represented properly, and the council is a dysfunctional council. So we heard that there are other things going on in Tower Hamlets Council, which we shall be coming to discuss in detail in the later, fuller version. This one will be updated at about midday on Saturday, the 25th of July 2020. Until then, we are ending this